What is the number one thing that you don't appreciate until it's gone? I never thought I'd be the kind of guy who'd cry over a dog until Max was gone. Sarah and I had just moved into our first apartment together back in 2009. We were both working entry-level jobs, barely making rent, but we felt like we had it all figured out. One Saturday morning, Sarah started scrolling through Pet Finder while I was making coffee. "Look at this one," she said, turning her laptop toward me. On the screen was this goofy-looking golden retriever mix with one ear that flopped differently than the other. His name was Max, and he was 8 months old. The shelter description said he was energetic and loves everyone he meets. 2 hours later, we were at the animal shelter filling out adoption papers. Max came home with us that afternoon, and from day one, he was everywhere we were. If I was cooking dinner, Max was lying on the kitchen floor, watching my every move. If Sarah was studying on the couch, Max had his head in her lap. When we went to bed, he'd curl up on this old blanket we put at the foot of our bed, and I'd fall asleep listening to his steady breathing. Those early years were perfect. Max would come with us on weekend camping trips to state parks, where he'd spend hours chasing chipmunks and swimming in whatever lake or stream we found. He never caught anything, but he never stopped trying. During the week, I'd take him running through our neighborhood every morning before work. He had this routine where he'd grab his leash in his mouth and prance around the apartment when he saw me putting on my running shoes. When Emma was born in 2014, I wasn't sure how Max would handle suddenly not being the center of attention. I should have known better. From the moment we brought Emma home, Max appointed himself as her personal guardian. He'd lie next to her crib during naps and follow us around whenever we carried her from room to room. When she got older and started crawling, Max would gently move out of her way but never leave the room. By the time Tommy came along 2 years later, Max was a seasoned pro at the baby thing. Both kids learned to walk by grabbing onto Max's fur and pulling themselves up. He never complained, never snapped, just stood there patiently while they used him as a furry jungle gym. The dog park became our Saturday morning ritual. Max knew exactly when it was time to go. He'd start pacing by the front door around 8:30 a.m., tail wagging. At the park, he had his regular crew of dog friends, a German Shepherd named Rocky, a little beagle called Peanut, and this massive Saint Bernard named Tank who Max was absolutely terrified of despite Tank being the gentlest giant you'd ever meet. I started noticing changes when Max turned 10. The morning runs got shorter because he'd start panting heavier. Those weekend camping trips became day trips because he'd get tired faster. At the dog park, he'd spend more time lying in the shade watching other dogs play instead of joining in. The vet visits became more frequent. Arthritis in his hips. Then some heart issues. Sarah and I started having those conversations you don't want to have, about quality of life and when you know it's time. But Max still had good days mixed in with the harder ones, so we kept going. The end came faster than we expected. One Thursday morning, Max couldn't get up from his bed. I carried him to the car, and Sarah held him in her lap while I drove to the emergency vet. Dr. Martinez had been Max's vet for years, and I could see it in her eyes before she said anything. We stayed with him until the very end, both of us crying and telling him what a good boy he was. You sent. The house felt impossibly quiet that first night. No sound of Max's tags jingling when he moved around. No rhythmic breathing from the foot of our bed. Emma and Tommy kept asking when Max was coming home, and trying to explain death to a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old was one of the hardest things I've ever done. That was 3 years ago. There's a framed photo of Max on our mantle now, the one from his first day home with us, where he's sitting on our old couch with that goofy expression. Every time I look at it, I remember something new about him that I'd forgotten. The way he'd tilt his head when we talked to him. How he'd steal socks from the laundry basket and hide them under the coffee table. The sound of his tail thumping against the wall when we'd come home from work. I loved Max every day he was with us, but somehow I love him more now that he's gone.